Hi everyone, welcome to our live ABND webinar. I'm Brenda from the scholarships team and I'm here with Kathleen, who's with you in chat. We're very excited to have Jose Nieto as our guest today. Jose is Udacity's own Android content developer who also graduated from the Android Developer Nano Degree program. Thank you for joining us, Jose. We're going to start our webinar with Jose answering your pre-submitted questions, and then we'll reserve the last 15 to 20 minutes for answering your live questions. If you're in chat, please post your questions in the chat channel for Kathleen to gather for us. So Jose, let's start off by having you answer general Java and Android questions.
Good for that.
Okay. So the first question is from Joe W. And he asks, is there a trick to understanding class and object definitions and instantiation?
Okay, so I think the way you can look at this is the class is essentially kind of the text file that you write. It's not completely true because it's after compilation, but you get the class. But in a way, it's the text file that you write. So that's where you have your code. So in that code, you define how the object is going to be. So let's say you define, let's say, an object of type car, and you can say which is the color of the car, which are the properties. It can go forward or backwards. It has, well, certain properties, right? So then you have those fields. You have the constructors, usually one or more constructors for that object, and then probably you have the getters and setters and any other methods that you may need. Then when you compile and you run the code in the Java virtual machine, it's at runtime that it's generating objects. So in some moment, you're going to say, I want to create a new car with these properties, this color, this size, this number of seats, etc. And that gets created with the data that you have put on the class. So the class essentially has the information about how you create and instantiate an object of that type. What are the properties that it has, like, let's say, color, size, and which are the things that it can do, which will be the methods. So it can go backwards, forward, it can change the gear, or whatever it is. So essentially, that would be the idea, I think.
Okay, thank you. The next is a general Java question from Javier. And he would like to ask about understanding methods and object-oriented programming better.
Well, so it's a bit related to what I was talking. So in a class, you will have the constructor, the fields, or also called member variables, and you have the methods that are, well, maybe the kind of things that that object can do. So let's give an example of the card. You can have a method to go forward, and a method to go backward, and another method to change the gear. So the variables are the properties of the object, and maybe you can think about the methods in a way of the things that the object can do and how it does those things.
Okay. All right, this general Java question comes from Hend, and he says, when I came to make a new app, I got confused about my Java code. So how could I develop my thinking skills to think as a developer? Should I practice on solving problems? And if so, where can I find a good resource for that?
Well, I think that it's a bit of practice. There's no really a way to get to understand everything if you don't write the code. So probably the idea is to try to do things in small increments, like trying to do, like, okay, so I'm gonna do this bit, you can forget about the rest. When you're done, you go to the next step. So if you are building an app, it can be things like, okay, that's gonna make my button open the next activity, or something like this. There are many things that you can do to improve the Java in general. We have two, at least that I know, 2 courses at Udacity that are completely free. One is like basic Java and one is object-oriented programming with Java. So something that I see in some of the students is they have finished Android basics, and while they don't feel maybe sometimes so confident with Java. So what I see in some students is taking a break of a few weeks to improve their Java skills, taking some other course like the ones that we have in university for free. And then once they are feeling more confident, they have started to do Android only. And that can be a good thing to do.
It's good advice. Thank you. Okay, this is a general Android question from Melinda. And Melinda asks, how to implement save instance state.
Okay, so, well, before explaining, just give a bit of context, okay? So we have mainly two situations. One is where we have a configuration change. It can be different things, but the most obvious example is when we rotate the device, and that destroys our activity and creates a new one. But it also happens when we are not in our activity, we are not in our app because we have exited from that some time ago, and the OS needs some resources. So it's going to free memory to be able to open some of the apps, and that might imply that your application is killed. So in those two scenarios, it happens that when you come back to the activity, whatever it is, because it has been killed or because you have rotated the device, you want to find everything in the same place or in the same state that it was when you left, right? And that's something that makes a lot of sense. So the way that we do it is we have a method which is on save instance state, and that method returns it's a bundle. So we put in that bundle that is received as a parameter the things that we want to save. Usually those are small bits of information like ints or strings and Boolean, and we can add something a bit bigger like parcellables or serializable objects. But essentially it's the minimum information that the activity will need to restore its state when it comes back. And then what we do is in onCreate, we're receiving a bundle, which is the save instance bundle. The first time that we open the activity, that bundle is null. So we know that is completely fresh. But in the other cases, that bundle comes with information. And we know that we are coming from rotating the device or configuration change in general, or it can be that we are coming from having the application killed by the OS. So what we do is essentially if the bundle that we receive is null, then we just do the normal thing because it's completely fresh activity. If it's not null, then we get the data from inside the bundle and put the bits and pieces where we need it to restore the state.
All right, this next question is a general Android question from Arthur, and Arthur asks, when using edit text, how do you hide the keyboard and make it only appear when you're ready to use it?
Okay, so my understanding with this question is that if you click an edit text, obviously you're gonna have the keyboard showing. That makes sense, right? But sometimes it happens that you arrive to a screen, to an activity, and the keyboard is showed straight away. And sometimes you don't want that. And the reason for this is that the edit text is receiving the focus straight when you arrive to the activity. So the way to avoid that happening, if you don't want the keyboard to show straight away, will be to give the focus to some of the element in your UI. And then only when the user clicks on the edit text, the keyboard will show. To hide the keyboard, if you need, you can do it programmatically. There's a method, something like input, something I really don't remember by memory. But if you Google something like Android hide keyboard, you're gonna find it like super straight away. It's just a very short, like 3-liner, and that's it.
Okay. This question is about, comes from Chrissy, and Chrissy says, is it better practice to use on-text change listener rather than on-click listener with edit text?
On text change, yeah, okay. So these are like two completely different things. So the on-click listener is just to capture the event of something being clicked, whatever it is, a button or an edit text or anything. On-text change listener is to capture the event of the text being modified in an edit text. So let's say that we have an edit text that is for search functionality, and then we have a button next to it, and the user types the text that he or she wants to search, and then clicks on the button, and the search is made. Okay. Then the way we'll do is we'll attach an on-click listener to the button, and then when we capture that event, we search for the string that is written on the edit text. Other way that we can do that is without a button. So as the user types, you search what is there. So for that, what you will attach will be an on-click listener or text change text change listener to the edit text. And as the user types, you are making the search. That sometimes is a bit of an overkill, particularly if you need to make level request, because for everything that the user types, or for every single letter that types or deletes, it's going to make a new network call, and that's usually too much. So the recommended way to do it is to attach an on-text change listener, and then have a bit of delay. So if the user types too quick, then you only search once when the user ends the typing, instead of searching for every single letter that the user is typing.
This is kind of a similar question from Marian. She says, hi, Jose. It seems that in the course, we have moved away from using Android on-click in the XML and towards using only the one on-click listener in the Java code. As a developer, are there times when on-click is still used, or is it better practice to use on-click listener instead? What is the difference?
Okay, so as a developer, you will never put the on-click on your XML. Okay, and then you were probably wondering, why are we doing this in first instance? So we think that as you are learning, and you don't know much about Java, it's much easier to get you doing some things by having the on-click listener on the XML. Because otherwise we will need to explain you the listener, how to use it in the Java code, and then the on-click method, and all these kind of things. So what we do is, let's use the on-click on the XML initially, and then we will move to something better, which is the other option. The reason why using the on-click on the XML is not a good option is because then your Java code and your XML code are tight, coupled together. So let me explain what this means. If you do that, and for some reason you want to rename the method, you want to change the name of the method, you need to change it in the Java code and in the XML code, and that's bad. Also, if one day you want to use another layout, then you need to make sure that that layout also has the on-click in the XML, because otherwise it's not going to work. And that's not good. It's much easier if you have all that only in the Java, and then your XML is just completely agnostic, doesn't need to know any particular thing about what's the name of the method that the activity is going to use. Well, so that makes things easier. Yeah, so that's the reason why we are moving from one to another. You have noticed that. And in short, you should stop using the on-click on the XML and never use it again.
Did you hear that, everybody? All right, this style question comes from Kashivia, and she says, I combine same attributes of similar views, such as button, text views in style for shortening the code. Is this the norm? And when should I use the parent in style? I understand that parent properties are inherited, but if you can give me some real examples, that would help in my understanding.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think that's the usual thing is quite reasonable that you have some styles and then your objects, your views, your UI layout inherit from those styles and themes. Rather to be going to every single button and say which is the color of the button if you're going to have all the colors the same. It's like an example, okay? So that minimizes the code that you need to write, and you need to make a change. You change on the style, and all the buttons are change the color, and that's it. Your life is much easier like this. Regarding the point on the inheritance from the parent theme, that's quite a normal thing. So if you think about that, your default style, the default theme, if you open the styles HTML, it's already having a parent, and that's probably something like some app compat, like dark action bar or something like this, right? And if you take that default one as an example, you see that you have your primary color, your secondary color, your primary dark, which essentially what means is that whatever is not defined in your specific theme, it will use what is defined on the parent. And it will override the rest of the things that you have used. So if you take another theme and you inherit from the theme, that's usually the name by default, essentially you just need to add to that new theme the things that you want to be different from the parent, and that's it.
Okay. This next question comes from Zach, and Zach asks, one of the benefits of constraint layouts is it helps reduce the number of nested views. When nesting is necessary, is there a general rule of thumb for how many layers you should try to keep in order to avoid performance hits? At what level does it start to become apparent?
Well, there's no any rule. There's not anything that you can really say at the starting here is there are some specific situations, like for example, if you have a linear layout that uses weights, and inside another linear layout that also uses weights, that is a performance problem. But the Android Studio is gonna show you the warning on that. So usually it's difficult that you can get if you go crazy to some problems, but nesting layouts is not that necessary. Constraint layout is true that is flat, and that's a good thing. But it doesn't mean that you always need to use constraint layout. And if your design makes sense to have a list view, then use a list view. If it's much better to have a linear layout, then use a linear layout. Use whatever makes sense to you, and in general, you should be fine. If you find yourself doing like too many levels, probably you should need to rethink about that. But there's no, unfortunately, any rule that I can give you to deal with that.
Okay. This next one's for Brenda, and she asks, can you go over the best strategy for getting the landscape layout set up? I had my vertical layout, but had lots of issues getting the landscape layout to work, and I think there must be a series of steps that are best to be followed. I was also thinking that if you need the whiteboard behind you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I can do that. Well, in this, for now, but it's good to have it into account. Well, I don't really know which issues Brenda is having specifically. So essentially, the way that it works is you have your layout in your resource file, and then if you want to do the portrait version of that layout, what you will do is to have another folder, which is would be layout land for landscape, or it can be different other alternatives, and put the layout there. new layout for landscape. Now, what's going to happen is that the device knows the properties of the device and how it is in which it's running, right? So when your app is running, the OS knows that it's running on this type of screen that has this density, that has this resolution. It knows that it's on portrait or it's on landscape and all that. And what it's going to do is it's going to take the layout that is more reasonable for those circumstances. So in the default, it will take the portrait, and when you are in landscape, it will take the layout with the exact same name, but the version that you have in the layout land folder. That said, there's not much science on that. And the thing is, say probably this, you have an example. You have two edit tests and one button, and you have a linear layout like this. When you are in portrait, that works well, but if you are in landscape, maybe you need to scroll to click the button, and that's bad. It's not a good user experience, right? So maybe you just want to change the design to have the two edit test and the button on the right instead of below, so the user doesn't need to scroll. And as I said, the OS is going to be dynamically taking the layout of the resources. If this is same thing applies for strings or any other thing that you can have with different folders.
Okay, we have one more general Android question, and then we're going to move on to some project questions. Okay, this comes from Angeli, and Angeli asks, what are the perks of using Kotlin in conjunction with Java and XML for applications?
Yeah, well, I will take this as the usual Kotlin question. Kotlin is always like someone asks about this. So, well, for those who don't know what Kotlin is a programming language, which is a good alternative to Java. Kotlin, as Android developers, we have been able to use Kotlin for some time now. But it was last year in Google I/O. Google announced official support for Android. And nowadays we can even start to see documentation written in Kotlin. Kotlin has some nice advantages. You can achieve same things with much less code, which essentially means that it's less code to write, less code to maintain, and less lines of code where you can mess up. You don't have null pointer exceptions in Kotlin. You have a bunch of new things. Imagine that you are writing Java for years and you think, you know what? I would like this to be a bit different. This other thing, if it could be like this instead. So, well, some people say, okay, let's going to build a new programming language and it's going to make it. Something good about Kotlin is completely interoperable with Java, which means that the Kotlin code will compile and run in the Java machine, virtual machine, in the same way that the Java code will do. Which means that you can have one class, one activity written in Kotlin, and one activity written in Java in the same project, in the same application, and they will compile and work together nicely. And they can communicate, and you can call one method that is written in Java from one method that's written in Kotlin. Well, no, actually, I don't think you can do that. But you can use the classes and instantiate an object, all that things. So, yeah, it's something that you will have to end up learning in the future.
Okay. Now, this is a project question about project 2, which is Scorekeeper, and it comes from Lucretia. And she asks, I want to do so much with my second project, but I keep getting stuck on sticking with one good idea. What do you do when you hit a creative roadblock?
Well, professionally speaking, I'm not the creative guy, right? So if I'm working on a project that someone has the idea and someone builds the design, someone decides about the colors and all that. That said, and focusing more on the projects that you need to build, I would say try to keep it simple in an extent. You don't need to make anything super crazy.
That's good advice. Okay, this is a question about Project 3, the quiz app from Rosario. Working with checkboxes and radio buttons, I am confused on how to declare and call methods.
Okay, so yeah, well, I marked this as a P3 question because I think it's related probably. So essentially, you have your radio buttons that are radio group, and then the user can select any of them, and in some point you're going to have a button. You click on the button, it's going to check if the answer is right or wrong. Then the only thing that you need to do is to find out which element, which of those radio buttons is checked, because that's the one that the user has selected. So you're gonna attach an Onclick listener to your button, and in your Onclick method, what you're gonna do is which ID is the ID of the radio button that is checked. Okay, and then you're gonna say, so if this is the one that is checked, then the answer is good, and otherwise is not. And it's essentially that. There's no much more.
Okay. So we have one last project question, and then we're going to move on to career questions. Okay. So this one comes from Olivia, who asks, can we use Android Studio Preview with Jetpack for any of our projects? If yes, can we use all the architecture components or just some?
Well, the answer is you cannot use any of that, unfortunately. So the couple of rules of thumb that you can follow. First is you are never allowed to use anything that is not considered stable. So that means you cannot use an Android Studio preview version. You cannot use a Gradle Alpha or Gradle Beta or anything like that. Library-wise, you cannot use anything that is not stable either. So alphas, betas are not allowed. If you use any of these, the reviewers mark your project as ungradable, and you will have to fix that before it's graded. Then that said, coming back to the Android Studio and architecture components, architecture components and Jetpack. So most of the things that are new in Jetpack are exactly alpha. I don't think that they're matching beta yet. So that cannot be used. The second rule of thumb for Android Basics nanodegree is that you cannot use libraries for something that is considered core functionality. Okay, we consider that you are in a stage of learning, and you need to write the code yourselves, at least for the things that are core functionality. Okay. For Android nanodegree, it's a bit different. They will be able to start using some of the Android architecture components soon, but I think I will explain about that in the Android nanodegree webinar. That's it. Yeah,
and for those of you watching the Android nanodegree webinar that Jose is referring to is today from 4 to 5 Pacific time. So please join in. Okay, moving on to careers. These next two questions are kind of related, but we'll go to the first one first from Benjamin, who asks, what are some things that we can do in addition to completing nanodegrees to become both marketable to employers and prepare for freelancing opportunities?
I think that anything that you can do is good. Some things that I did when I was a student, and I think that they work well. You can try to find local meetups. That works well. Meetup.com is a good source of meetups. So you can attend regularly every now and then to some meetups. Usually you have technical talks. It means that you can learn something and also do some networking and meet people. you will be surprised on how meeting people can help you to find a job in the future. So as an example, I can say at some point I was looking to change company, and I saw in LinkedIn a given company was looking for someone, and I thought, okay, I met a guy like maybe 1 year ago or more, and I believe that this guy was the Android lead for this company. So I checked on his profile online, and exactly he was that. So we were together. We were joined in LinkedIn, connected, right? So I dropped him a message and I said, "Well, you probably don't remember about me. We met like more than 1 year ago in a meetup, and I saw that your company is looking for someone." And the surprise is when in his reply, when he said, "Yes, of course, I remember you." And he told me, not only I remember you, I've been following you up and your progress since we met. So please send me your CV. I'm going to ask human resources to arrange an interview with you. And I didn't end up working in that company because they decided that they prefer not to hire anyone else at that moment. But that opened that door, and that's a good thing. Same thing happens for conferences. Try to go for some conference. I understand that conferences are pricey sometimes, but something that I've seen people doing is applying for volunteer, so you can help the organizers, and in exchange you can benefit from most of it. You may not be able to watch all the sessions, but most of them, and that's something good. So something that worked for me as well was an internship. Try to maybe build some app and publish in Google Play, because it's quite common to see in job specs that they want someone who has 1 or 2 applications published, and that way you can say, I know how the signing of the application works, the upload, how all these things, Google Developer Console and all that. So you can also write some blog posts just to get some presence on the things that you learn. And you can just try to contribute to some open source project. There are many things, and you don't need to do all of them.
That was a great story, by the way, about how important connections are. Okay, the next question comes from Kamal, who asks, given that this is the first exposure to Android development and Java for many in the program, what concepts or things do you recommend we prioritize as we learn, especially for technical interviews and preparing for our first job search in the field?
Well, I think that I will focus on the contents of the nano degree, to be honest, because I think that sometimes you can do, okay, so I can do something else at the same time that I do the nano degree. And if you can do it, that's okay, not everyone can. But still, even if you can do it, to me, it makes more sense to finish the nano degree sooner. You don't risk your graduation, your scholarship, and then you take some other course on something else later. So it's like those students that I mentioned before, that they were maybe thinking, I need to improve my Java a bit more, and they said, okay, I'm gonna finish the nano degree because with what you learn, you can continue, and then maybe improve my Java afterwards. That seems to me more reasonable.
Yeah. Okay. Gloria asks, what is a typical Android job interview like?
Okay, so, well, usually you have a recruiter that calls you when you apply to a job. Not every company uses recruiters, but most of them, right? So then the recruiter passes your CV to the customer, the client, and sometimes they ask you to have like a phone interview or kind of HR, just to find out a bit more about you, see if you can be a good fit. Sometimes the phone interview is more technical. Then usually they ask you, there's maybe 2 different ways. Sometimes the companies ask you to go for a face-to-face interview. If they like you, then they ask you to write some code test to show a bit of your skills. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they do the other way around. They do the code test first, and then if you pass, they invite you for the face-to-face interview. So in my experience, the way that I did was I sent CVs on the job board, and maybe no one calls you. That can happen. But one day a recruiter calls you, and he says he's going to pass your CV to his client, but you never know anything more about it. But you get to the point in which you see that you consistently receive the calls from the recruiters. And maybe you're still not getting them coming back to you with the first interview. But one day you get the first interview, and you probably don't pass the interview, but you get into a point in which you are still learning. As you're learning, you're improving your CV, you are adding something to your portfolio, you have published a new app, you are doing this. So you see that consistently the clients come asking you for an interview. And as you go on, you will see as consistently you pass the first interview and they ask you for the code test, and you don't pass the code test, but consistently, sometime later you start. So it's building all that, and it's a moment in which you can really go on the process very, very easily. So there has to be a bit of patience and practice.
Yeah. And for those of you that are going through interviews, please help us by sharing your stories in the careers channel. Your experiences really do help other students when they come to that point. So just a reminder there. Okay, now on to the next career question. Gwen would like to know, why did you decide to take the Android degree?
Well, this is quite a lot of story, to be honest. But, well, to make it short, I had taken some online courses in Android in different platforms. And it was like, there's no way that with a course like this, I can get a job. It's completely impossible. And then I thought, I need something better. And I started to look for master's degrees. So I choose one. It was very difficult to find one that was suitable. I choose one. And in short, the story is that they wrote me an email and said the application process is open. And I had been waiting 3-4 months for that moment to come. It was not starting the course. It was only applying.
Okay.
And I went home. I was super motivated. I have all my paperwork ready. I was going to do this. And for some reason, at that moment, I thought, today I have not checked the news. So I think, okay, I'm going to check the news. And then I come back and do the application. It's going to take me 5 minutes. So I checked the news, and that day was Google I/O, and that day Google had announced the Android Nano degree Adidas. And it's interesting how things happen sometimes. So I look at this and say, okay, there's no need to apply for a master's degree. And it seems that it worked for me. So.
Yeah, it's good that you followed your gut.
Yeah.
Check the news. Okay, the next one comes from Jamie, who asks, would you recommend applying for a career position after the beginner Android app dev
Android
degree?
Basics.
Yeah, Android Basics.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. You can give it a try. We've seen students finishing Android Basics and getting a job. So I know a student, in fact, I know her in person. She lives in London, where I live as well. And she got the Android Basics scholarships last year. Mm-hmm. And before taking the course, she had never in her life written a single line of code. And she got her first job as a junior Android developer before finishing Android Basics. It's quite a extreme situation, to be honest. My story was completely the other extreme around. It was like, for me, it was super painful to get my first job. I was more than ready, and it was like, how can I be so unlucky? So you're probably not going to be so lucky as her. You're going to be probably not going to be so unlucky as me, but you're going to be somewhere in the middle. And probably that's something in the middle is Android. That's what makes sense to me.
Yeah, patience and persistence.
Yeah, so I would say, yeah, you can go give it a try, but think also that statistically, you're going to fail much more times than the times that you're going to succeed. So keep on doing what you're doing, improve your skills, learn new things, improve your CV, and you see like, my CV last month was amazing, but this month I have published in a group. Like, now it's more amazing.
Yes.
And then months later, it's even more amazing, and
Yes.
so on. And you will get there.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So we have 5 more minutes of career questions, and then we're going to go to live questions. Okay. The next one comes from AJ, who says, what would your suggest track be for continuing education and job possibilities?
Well, I think that if you are interested in working in Android, then the natural step is to progress to Android Basics. To Android Nano Degree. Because obviously the more you know, the better chances that you have to get a job, right? And after all, you need to think that you are competing with people who can be very well prepared as well to get that job. So no one is going to give you for free. So as I said before, keep on improving your skills and learning new things.
Okay. Let's see. This next one comes from Brian. For a person with no professional experience in any profession, what do you recommend, or what approach should we take to land a job as mobile developers?
Well, I think it's more or less similar to what we were talking about. Is you need to be persistent, you need to be focused, you need to be committed. If you get distracted and then you don't do the thing that you have to do, then you're probably not going to get there. In the way you might find some pain and some frustration, it's important that you learn how to deal with that. Try to learn something from every. Say, I should have known this answer for this question in this interview, and I failed. But okay, don't worry. Next time you're not gonna fail for one. So keep on improving, and you will get there eventually. So it's a bit. Sometimes you need to be a bit patient.
Yeah. Okay, this comes from Inga, who says, as a Hispanic aspirant to developer, older than 35, what do you think are my odds of making it into a successful career in Android development? Yeah.
Well, I think the fact that you are Hispanic or any, I'm Hispanic in theory, I'm from Spain, right? So when I started to feel interested in Android, was kind of 33, 34, and 37 now. Probably people think that I'm younger than I am. So it's perfectly possible. And if I have managed to do it, then honestly, everyone can do it. I have worked very hard. I have made a lot of effort, and sometimes you need to sacrifice things to be able to get where you want to be. And I have spent many Saturday nights at home studying and doing my projects and coding. When some of the people would prefer to go out for some drinks. But I think it's just something that I say as well when I give some of my talks. It's like if you don't sacrifice for what you want, then what you want becomes the sacrifice. So you need to decide what you want to sacrifice in all this. So it's perfectly fine. If you have certain age, then it means that you have certain experience. Not in this field, but in other things. And you also can try to get those soft skills that you already have, those transferable skills, and put them on the table as well when you interview.
This one's from Christina, who says, I'm curious about your previous career you had before you decided to take Android course.
Well, I've done many different things in my life. I think that some people know when they are young what they want to do in life, and for some other people it takes longer. I don't think that's anything wrong with that. It's perfectly fine. So that was my case. It took me time. So I was doing like laboratory work after I graduated in chemistry, and I did a bit of Java for a few months, and I did project management for kind of 4 or 5 years. I moved to London, and I was in the other Java side, which is serving coffees, working in restaurants and coffee shops. And then when I decided that I had found what I wanted to do in life, I just went for that and save any effort. And that's what has taken me to this moment in my life.
Well, we're happy to have you as part of the Udacity team.
Thanks, Brenda.
Okay, this last career question comes from Joseph, who says, how many projects do you have in your portfolio? Did you have in your portfolio before you felt ready to apply for developer roles? How long did it take to get to that point?
Well, that's a tricky question. Well, my portfolio was mainly the projects that I was building as part of the undergraduate degree. On top of that, I had one project that I had, one app that I had published in Google Play, because I thought that it was good for my CV. And something that I had as well is I had done some hackathons, and then I had the project for the hackathon, and which is something that also you can do. It's like to meet people and something and do some coding. I was lucky to win 2 hackathons in some of my attempts with my team, so that's also something you can nicely put in your CV and you can be proud of.
Yeah.
So for me, it took really long. I mean, I'm not the best example, to be honest. My situation was completely crazy. We didn't have much time, so I prefer not to go in detail on that. But essentially, I would say I'm not the best example. What I think is that I have myself been in interviews as an interviewer, right? And I'm not the only one. So from my perspective, it's going to be more common that you are a Udacity graduate or Udacity student, and you get to an interview, and it happens that maybe you don't know, but the person who's the interviewer is also a graduate as you, right? That's going to happen. And we tend to think that the product that Udacity puts on the market are the courses, and in a sense, it's what Udacity sells.
Yes.
But I like to think that the product that Udacity puts on the market is the graduates, right? Yes. And back in my days, probably it was difficult because they said, okay, using the CV, Udacity, whatever this means. Okay. Now they say, oh, well, Udacity, that's to be serious, right? So I think that you will have situations where someone receives your CV, they see you are a graduate, and maybe the person is not a graduate, but they have had in the team a graduate, and they know these guys can well prepare. And maybe that's the reason that opens the first door for the interview. So I think that we are somehow opening the doors for the future generations, and that's really good.
It's really good. Okay, let's go to live questions now. We're going to try and get to them all. First one's from Jose. I'm currently learning retrofit. How do you approach or suggest approach to learning new libraries like retrofit?
Well, retrofit is a must-have. I think is you will end up using it 100% guaranteed. So it has a bit of a learning curve, but it's time well invested. I usually say that in your projects, it's good that you do an extra, that you do a bit more. I've seen students trying to be crazy, and they're gonna have this project, and I'm gonna do this and this and this and this. It's like, well, you can spend 6 months doing the project, and you're never gonna graduate. That's not the point. So the project has a purpose that you learn something. If you add something extra with some common sense, then it's something that you're gonna take with you, and something more that you're gonna learn. So probably I would say, okay, you're gonna do popular movies, you want to use retrofit, go for that. Don't try to learn 7 things at the same time, but yeah, so yeah, some things like retrofit, together with JSON and Moshi, that are kind of the most popular JSON parsers, Picasso, Glide, all this, yeah, those things, you probably want to use them. But as I said, and remember, because this is important, this is for Android Basics, you are not allowed to use libraries for core functionality in Android Basics. Take that into account.
Okay, good to remember. Okay, Rosario, any advice or best practices for how to start thinking simpler and not complicate your methods very much?
Well, I think it's a bit of experience as well. That's why we have I think there's so much value in the code reviews, that someone can tell you, you see you are overcomplicating here, or you can extract this, and then you don't have this duplicated code. So I don't have any particular advice. Try to start by making the methods meaningful, the names. So if you read the name of the method, then it's clear what the method does, and that the method does that and not that plus other 7 things.
Yeah.
Because then if it does 7 other things, then probably you need to split in some other methods that are more specifically. So there's like what we call the single responsibility principle, which essentially is like, okay, for a method, for a class, have one responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a method should have the responsibility to do one thing, not 7.
Mm-hmm.
Then a good starting point.
Very good starting point. Okay. This next question. Hello, Jose. I'm on lesson 4, creating list arrays. How often would you say you're creating array list adapters in your day-to-day programming?
Well, not array list adapters are probably like the basic example, right? So you're probably going to have your UI being a bit more complex, and you will have to use some custom adapter. But it's quite common that you have an application that shows a list of something, elements, where that list is not, the size is not known. So it can be whatever number of elements. That's quite common. So you will do that quite often. I remember I had an application time ago, and I did like 10 or 11 lists in recycled views in one day because it had like a lot. That was probably quite a extreme case.
Yeah.
But it's quite normal that you're going to have lists. Okay. If you go and you open an app, you Netflix or Spotify or your email, or there's a list of things that you scroll, and that's quite normal.
Okay. From Olivia, what's the current minimum software development kit we should be choosing for our projects and practicing on for job readiness?
Well, there's no any particular rule either on that. You don't want to use versions that are too old, because the maintenance also is a problem. Mm-hmm. But if you use only the latest versions, then you will not have many users, because the fragmentation and everything is there. So something probably reasonable to work with is API 19. I think that should be okay. It's probably not ideal. Most developers will love to be able to write things in API 21 onwards, but most of the So I think 19 gives you the nicest spot where you are in a reasonable situation and you're still learning how to deal with different versions of the same thing.
All right, this comes from DJeton1. Jose, what's your workflow for creating a side project? Do you design it first or start programming? How do you fight analysis paralysis? Analysis paralysis.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a designer, so when it's like a side project, probably it's mostly like you want to learn something. So I know what I want to do more or less, and you end up doing things quite often, because it's a side project or a pet project, sometimes we call it this, is something that you have in your spare time to test things, to try and to. So I would say I never had like any particular paralysis on that. What I have is like lack of time to do the things that I would like to do. So sorry, I cannot really give you like that.
No, we understand. Okay, from Daniel. I'm sorry. Moving up from Ikram. For a beginner in Android development, what are some tips to succeed with during and after the Android Basics Nano Degree course? More in the sense of becoming a better developer.
Well, I think, as I said before, is try to focus on the course first, because I think it makes sense. The sooner you finish, the better. You can then continue with other things. Then I think you need to probably read some sources, some news on Android. We're trying to be up to date on what's the new things, and then develop that sense of I want to try this, I want to try that. And there are many things. You have Kotlin, you have Java, you have architecture components with the new Jetpack. So you will end up with a list of things that you want to try and learn. And it's like, this can take me years, seriously. So try to take care of the code that you write. There's something that there's quite a famous code that is like more or less. We'll have to check exactly, but essentially says that anyone can write code that a machine can understand. But writing code that another human can understand is what a proper developer does. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you need to think that the code that you write, if you are in a company working, it's going to be end up read by someone, and maybe you're not even there in the company anymore, and that someone needs to understand.
Yes.
So if you try to make a code that is easy to understand, or the meaningful names and all these kind of things, that's probably something to do. You can do some katas, KATA, if you want to search for that. There's not like Android specific, but you can do some Java katas, TDD. There are many things. So just choose one and give it a try. Go ahead with the next one.
Lots to learn. Daniel asks, what kind of projects did you have in your portfolio?
Well, various things. I was working for a digital agency, so we had projects for many different customers. So some big companies, some startups, some I remember, for example, the Drinkaware, for example, this in London is the association like this to prevent people from drinking too much and have bad habits when drinking and alcohol.
Okay, yeah.
So we have different things like this, working as startup as well. And here at Udacity, the apps that I build are more like the toy apps that you use, right? Not like a prototype app is for people to use or to buy,
Right.
But for learning purposes. So it's quite diverse.
Okay. Okay, this is the last one, and this comes from Gloria. And Gloria asks, if you were in the ABN, what kind of portfolio would you work towards developing so that you have a better chance for junior Android developer positions?
Well, I think that for those who finish Android basics, you have the tour guide, you have the news app that is making the calls to the Guardian API, you have the inventory app. I mean, they're reasonably solid applications. Obviously, if you compare with the applications that someone does in Android Nanodegree, they're in a different level, right? So I think that if you decide to go for the path of going for Android Nanodegree, which is quite reasonable, then you naturally, doing anything more than that, you will grow your portfolio quite well. So try to get visibility in your CV. I remember one guy asked me if I could have a look at his CV, and I looked, and he was linking to his GitHub repo. That's one link, and so it was to his GitHub account, and that's one link, and then inside that he has different projects. And I said, I think that this approach is wrong. What you should do is to say, I have done this app with a brief description and the link to the repo for that app. And I've done this app with a brief description. I have used this technology, this thing here, and a link. And then you have like a list of things.
Yes.
It's more visible, and then it looks how it should be.
Yes.
Because the other way, if someone actually clicks on you need the person who's seen the CV, you need the person to click on the link and go. You will see a list of repositories that, you need the guy to check and find out which is that. That's not going to work. So try to give that a bit of visibility.
Okay. That's great advice. All right, that's it for our hour. Thank you again for joining us. Jose will be back with us at from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific. 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time for the Android Advanced webinar. So we hope to see you guys then too. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.